Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey peeps, today we're going to take a look at Tanto Cuore Oktoberfest. This is the newest expansion / standalone set from Japanime Games, originally from Arclight Games, if I could even speak. I also would be remiss if I didn't mention the new feature of my shelf in the back here, which is the Tanto Cuore Collector's Edition Big Box. You could get that as part of the Kickstarter for the Tanto Cuore Oktoberfest, the much delayed Kickstarter for Tanto Cuore Oktoberfest. And all it is just space to hold all 4 sets up to and including Oktoberfest, and also a randomizer deck of cards. But if you weren't able to get it, I don't know if they're going to sell it later. You're not missing out on too much, but it is nice to have a box to have on my shelf as a reviewer. That's a whole digression. Let's talk about this set, Oktoberfest. Much like with the other sets of Tanto Cuore, you have, it's a deck building game in the same vein as Dominion. It's very, very close to Dominion, as some people have said to their chagrin. I don't mind it so much. I think it's an improved version of Dominion. I think you can go and check out my other reviews if you want to know more about the game and how to play it. Mechanically speaking, I'm not going to do a full overview of Tanto Cuore, but I will tell you what's different about this set. First and foremost, as the name implies, this has to do with drinking alcohol. Of course, Oktoberfest. You have a whole deck of beer cards that you're going to have, which are going to be victory point cards with a couple of twists thrown in, like a blood alcohol level that you actually have to keep track of, sort of. There's also a new building, some new event cards, and then of course a whole bunch of general maids, many of which have to do with those beer cards. In fact, the only way that you're going to get those beer cards, you can't buy them normally, and they don't go into your deck, they just go into your private chambers. You have to use special general maids which will let you get them. So that is the whole theme of this set. And of course, just like with previous sets, you can mix and match between the sets and take what you want from some. You can take the private maids from the first 2 sets, use them here. You can take the beer cards, use them with the other maids, so long as you at least have one maid that lets you actually get the beer cards. So let me go ahead and give you a brief look at all of the stuff that comes in this set without doing a full Tanto Cuore overview. You can check out one of my other videos for that. Then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Alright, I'm going to show you all the new stuff that comes in the Oktoberfest expansion / standalone game for Tanto Cuore. And we're going to start with the most obvious difference in this set, and that is the beer cards. Now, as you can tell, the beer cards have a completely different back. So these are not going to be going into your deck like the other cards that you have in the game. Rather, when you purchase a beer card, it's going to go into your private quarters. So you're just going to take the card, and you're actually going to put it face down into your private quarters so that the other players can't see which beer card that you get. In fact, you don't have to show it at all, even reveal it the first time that you buy it, unless it has some sort of special effect on it. Now, the stack of beer cards is going to be shuffled up and put off to the side of the play area, and you're going to put the Oktoberfest card off to the side, face up first. That's always going to be the first card that you have available for purchase. Then, whenever the card that is currently out in visible to all the players is purchased, the next one is going to come up off the stack. However, you always have the opportunity to purchase either the card that's available or the card, or just a blind draw off the top of the stack. So now you might be asking, well, how do you buy these things? Well, you can't buy them through normal means. You can't just use love cards to employ them the way that you can all of the other cards in the game. There are very specific made cards that allow you to purchase beer cards, either off the top of the deck or the one that is available and for various cost. We're going to get to that when I go through all the different made cards, but I just figured it was important to explain to you what the actual beer cards do. So let's take a look at them in more detail. So you have the Oktoberfest card, which is always what you're going to start off with. Up in the top corner, as is typical with any of the cards in Tanto Cuore, you have the victory points for the card. So this card, the Oktoberfest card, is worth 3 victory points on its own. Now down here, you have a text special ability. In this case, it says that it counts as a Spire, which is a different type of beer that's in the deck. I'll show you that in a second. But on its own, it's still worth 3 no matter what. Over here in the bottom, you have the alcohol level. Now, the alcohol level, this is much like getting beer cards in general, is only going to matter for very specific made cards. Some made cards and some cards, another card that I'll show you in a minute that's actually in the beer deck, has a different effect depending on what your alcohol level is. So, for instance, there's one made that says if your alcohol level is between 2 and 9, you get extra victory points, something to that effect. Otherwise, the alcohol level doesn't have like an effect. It doesn't mean that you die if you if you imbibe too much alcohol. It's only for very specific cards. We'll cover all of that. So let me show you the other types of beer cards in the deck. Obviously, there are quite a few of them. There's doubles, triples, quadruples of some of the cards, but I'll just show you an example of each one of them. The Altir is just sort of a generic card. It's worth 4 victory points, blood alcohol level 3, that's it. The mugs on the other side are just how many, what the alcohol level of it is. Then you have a Bock. A Bock is worth 6 victory points on its own. It's got an alcohol level of 5. However, if you have 2 or more Maid Chiefs in your deck, it's worth 0 instead of 6. So you have to be careful how you buy Maid Chiefs if you decide to go with the Bock, because, I don't know, she's going to reprimand you or something? Here is the Spire card. As you can see, it actually has the same artwork as the Oktoberfest card, in fact. But the difference is a Spire card on its own is worth, see how it's a question mark? It's worth the number of victory points equal to how many Spires you have at the end of the game. This is one of the reasons why you want to keep your cards secret, because there are some ways to influence someone's stack of beer cards, and if someone sees you're getting too many Spire cards, that could be a problem. So one Spire on its own is worth 1 point. 2 of them makes each of them worth 2 points. If you have 3 of them, each one is worth 3, and so on and so forth. And the Oktoberfest card does count. Though, again, remember, the Oktoberfest card is just worth 3 on its own. Then you have the Pilsner. This is another one that changes depending on how many you have. If you have 1, it's worth 1 point. If you have 2, it's worth 6 points. And if you have 3, it's going to be worth 14 points. Then there are a couple of special event cards. And here's where the sort of push your luck element, small though it may be, here's where it comes into play with the beer deck. So remember I said that you can do a blind draw off the top of the deck. Well, whether you take a blind draw off the deck or if the card that you use to replace the face-up card is one of these, you gotta do it. So the Get Drunk card says that when the card is drawn or revealed, whoever is the turn player, that's the player who is currently doing this, they have to check their alcohol value, and if it's 9 or more, they have to discard a beer card randomly, and then that card gets chucked from the game. And there is, I believe, 2 Get Drunk cards in the deck. So that's a bad thing for it to happen to you. Then you have the Beer Stand card, which is not necessarily bad. It's actually worth 2 victory points on its own, but when you purchase it, you have to reveal it to all players, say what it does, and then put it face up into your private quarters instead of face down. Because until the end of your next turn, it allows everyone to purchase beer cards for 4 love. Now, when you purchase, and so you only get 1 purchase of a beer card from this card at least, but that includes you because it's until the end of your next turn. And then the card is going to go face down into your private quarters, the same as the other beer cards. Now, that's it for the beer cards. Let me show you some of the other cards that are in the game that actually sort of beg, borrow, and steal from some of the previous Tanto Cuore sets. So first you have event cards, and of course these are going to be centered around beer and such. The Let Me Drinks card says that when you gain event cards, when you gain them, they're usually going to go into, they're always going to go into someone's private quarters. In this case, they go into your own private quarters, and you can discard a love card from your hand and remove this card from the game. If you do, you take a beer card from any player's private chambers and add it to your private chambers. Then you have the Envy card, and the Envy card says that it's going to go into someone else's private chambers. You won't do this to yourself. All employee costs of made cards are increased by 1, but you can only have up to 2 Envy cards in someone's. You're only going to have that stack twice, so it'll be a total of +2 to the cost. And then, in order to get rid of it, you have to return a made cost with employee costs of 4 or more to the town, and then you get to put that card back in the town as well. And then you have the Heavy Storm card. Mind you that all of these are going to cost 5 love. The Heavy Storm card, when this is placed into, you put this on someone's building. In any player's private chambers, all cards that are placed underneath this card are treated as though they don't exist. And you can discard a 3 love card in order to get rid of it. Speaking of buildings, which was something from the Expanding the House set. The events were primarily in the original set of Tanto Cuore. Expanding the House introduced buildings. The only one that's in this set is the Beer Fest. This is essentially a protection card, so it's going to give you 1 victory point just for having it. You'll put this directly into your private quarters for 4 love, and then you get to put a beer card from your stack of private quarter beer cards underneath it, and that card becomes protected from anyone else's effects, like those event cards I just described. However, remember that one of those event cards could cancel this out. Now let's get to more standard fare in the Tanto Cuore universe, and that is the various made cards and currency cards that are in the game. So much like with every other set of Tanto Cuore, you have the love cards, including the one love cards that you start off with. Notice that the artwork this time is of the barmaids, the Oktoberfest girl. So there's the one love card. They're getting slightly more inebriated. There's the 2 love card, and they are super inebriated, and that is the 3 love card. These will be available for purchase. There are also 2 maid chief / chambermaid cards. You will start off with 3 Matilde Wees in your deck. She is the weaker chambermaid that you always start off with 3 of, along with 7 love. She's 2 to purchase if you really want to. You can chambermaid her for 2 servings. The interesting thing about her is that you can put one of her that is chambermaided into your... So if you've already chambermaided one before, which is putting her into your private quarters and out of your deck, you can instead discard her, and if you do, you get to choose a card from your hand and put it back in the town. That could be a way to get rid of cards you just don't want anymore, or other Matildes, potentially. Then you have the more expensive, the Maid Chief card of the set, the card that's worth 6 victory points. Anya Brunner. At the end of the game, if you have more than 3 Nicoles in your deck, which is another general maid in the set, Anya gains an extra victory point, and she costs 10. So let's go through the general maids. These are the ones that you're going to randomize or, by determination, put out into the town, and these can be mixed with the other sets. You have Paula Lowenberg. Essentially, you play her. The only effect that she has, and this costs you 1 serving, obviously, is that you will discard the top card off of someone's deck, could be yours, and then you'll do the effect. If it's a love card, you'll get that much currency. If it's some other kind of maid, you will get whatever the effect of that card is. Here is Nicole, as a matter of fact, who is influenced by Anya's card. By the way, I have these in order of love cost. So these are the 2 love cards. The highest cost card in the set is a 7. I'm not going to mention it from here on out. Just kind of pay attention if you want to know what the cost is. But Nicole Schmig's card says, now she has an ability. There's several cards in the set that have abilities that if you purchase them, that ability happens right away. And then from then on, you ignore that ability and just follow the rest of the cards. So for her, if you purchase her, when you employ her, you put it onto any player's, you can put it into any player's discard pile. You can return 2 Nicoles to the town from your hand. If you do, gain a general maid card with employee cost of 5 or less. This ability does not count as a serving. So you could put her, you probably wouldn't put her into your own deck. But you could, if in order to gamble that you're going to draw them both and be able to use them to take a general maid, but it's only going to be 1 of 5, so you're probably going to put these in other players' piles unless you really want to buff up the victory points of your Anya. Then you have Anna Hartman. Her ability, first off, she also has an employee ability, so when you employ her, you get to choose a player and have them discard the top card off of their deck, and she gives you 2 servings. Then you have Eileen Hammerschmidt. You can discard up to 2 cards from your hand and then draw the same amount of cards that you discarded. So if I discard 2 cards, I draw 2 cards. You have Kaori Hamasaki. This is one of the cards that you can chambermaid for 1 serving, and she also gives you 1 love if you play her. But depending on how many you chambermaid, you're either going to get 1 for 1 point, 2 victory points for 2 Kaoris, and for 3 Kaoris you get 12 victory points. You have Renata Abendroth. She gives you 2 love if you play her, and you choose a number and a player with 5 or more cards in their hand. That player discards a card that has an employee cost that is equal to the number that you named. It's kind of a gamble there. You have Ute Krombach, which love these names. So she costs 3. She has variable victory points. When you purchase her, you can draw an additional card at the end of your turn when you would redraw. So you can draw 6 cards instead of 5. You can chambermaid her for 1. She is worth normally a victory point if you chambermaid her. However, if you have a blood alcohol level between 2 and 9, this is the card I was talking about earlier, she's actually worth 2 points instead of 1. Now, Gina Kirsten here is a card in the game that you're probably going to most likely use to get most of your beer during the course of the game. When you play her normally, she lets you draw a card. When you employ her, she has an employee ability as well. You can immediately purchase a beer card for 2 love. And I do want to make it clear here that buying a beer card through means like this does not count as your employ. You do it during the same phase, but especially in the case of Gina, it doesn't count as your buy for the rounds. So you can do that when you first get her, and then later on, when you purchase her and then draw her regularly and play her, she allows you to buy a beer card for 4 love during your employ phase. So she's a very good way to get beer cards if you really want them. Julia Kinster lets you draw 2 cards and gives you an extra employ. You can sneak a peek at 2 cards from the top of the beer deck, and you can change the order of the cards. So you'll play that before you play that with Gina, and you're sitting pretty. Sarah Leonhardt gives you 2 love, and you may put a chamber-mated card from your private chambers into your discard pile and immediately gain 2 servings. If you need to do actions in a hurry, she's the way to do that. Kirika von Heidemann lets you draw 2 cards, but more importantly, when you play her, any of your chamber-made chief cards count as 1 love cards that are in your hand. Nadja Kirsten, sister of Gina, gives you 1 heart, and when you employ her, you may gain a beer card for 1 love, but she is a more expensive card than Gina. And you may discard a love card from your hand and pay 1 serving. If you do, you gain a beer card. So she's just like Gina, a little more specific, but definitely better, just not quite as cheap or easily accessible as Gina. Then you have Nora Morgenstern. She gives you 2 servings, but you can immediately spend a serving when you play her in order to look at the top 2 cards of your deck. However many love cards are in those 2 cards, you take them into your hand and discard the rest. You have Tony Darling, who I believe is the PR representative for Japanime Games. She gives you 1 draw, 1 heart, or 1 love, and 1 serving, and then you may discard a card from your hand, and if you do, you gain an extra employ. Then you have Hermina Baum. She gives you 3 love, and when you first purchase her, then after you draw a card, draw your cards at the end of your turn, you may discard a card from your hand, your new hand, and then draw a card. And then finally, the most expensive general maid card in the game, so expensive that she's worth 2 victory points on her own at 7. That is Elsa Reinmeyer. She gives you 2 employ, but more importantly, you get to draw 3 cards when you play her, and then every player that does not have less than 4 cards has to discard a card. So if you have 4 or more cards, including yourself, you have to discard a card. Of course, you're flush with new cards, so it's probably not going to bother you so much. So that is everything that comes in Tanto Cuore Oktoberfest. Let's get to my final thoughts. Okay, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of my final thoughts first. If you already like Tanto Cuore, if you already love Tanto Cuore, you're fine. I know some people had some grumblings like, maybe this new beer mechanic's going to be kind of weird and it's not going to be like the other sets. I like the new beer mechanic. I think it's solid. It's not like earth-shatteringly great, but it's still a very interesting thing. And much like with the Reminiscence cards from Romantic Vacation or all of the different buildings from Expanding the House, they don't change the game drastically, and it's still Tanto, it's still the game, and the fact that you can still mix and match things from different sets means that it's a perfectly great set, just like all of the others. How much you like or dislike the beer mechanic is a subjective thing. I think it's fine. I think I like other things, like the Reminiscence cards from previous sets, better, but it's still pretty interesting. And the private maids, too, I think is still a great thing to use with any of the sets. Now, for people who don't like Tanto Cuore, the previous sets, or hate it altogether, it lives up to its reputation for you. It's still not going to change your mind. There's nothing new in this set or that is new enough or good enough to change anyone's mind about it. It's in a lot of ways, much of the set is still more of the same with a couple of extra added benefits, which is how Tanto Cuore has always been. But I think the benefits are worthwhile, and I think there's some really interesting things amongst the general maids. So let's talk a little bit more about that beer mechanic. We'll break it down for more detail now for my final thoughts. I like there's a tiny little bit of push your luck with it. I wish there had been a little bit more of that, because there's only, I think, a grand total of 3 potentially negative cards, and one of them is the beer stand card, which is not really that negative. It's just enabling everyone to buy beer, but you get to do it too, and you get 2 victory points for it. So that's not a big deal. The get drunk card is negative, but it's not that bad. I mean, if you're really going hard and heavy through the beer deck, you're going to have a big stack of beer cards in your private chambers. You lose one randomly, it might be a big deal if it's like the 3rd Pilsner that takes you from 6 points to 14 points, but that's like the only case where it would be truly horrible. And that's the price that you pay for going through the deck like that. And hey, if everyone's doing it, your odds are even less that you're going to draw one of those, I think, 2 get drunk cards, so not a huge deal. And the fact that it is kind of a pain that you have to make sure that you play with certain general maids in order to even get the beer cards. I kind of wish it was more modular than that, because like I'm pretty sure, forgive me if my memory is flagging here, but I think that you could just play with the Reminiscence cards whenever you want with whatever set. You can play with the private maid cards with whatever set that you want. The events, the buildings, it doesn't really matter. Certain cards will influence them, yes, but you can still play with them. With Oktoberfest, you must play with at least one general maid who's going to let you attain beer cards. I think it's Gina or Nadia, or a couple of other ones are influenced by the beer cards but don't let you actually get them. So that's kind of a clunky thing. You need to make sure that you have one of those in your set if you really want to play with the beer cards. And you only have so many general maids, so that kind of hurts your flexibility. But other than that, I think it's very interesting. I like going for the different cards and sort of splitting your focus. Like, it's a much more viable option than going for the Maid Chiefs even. A couple of those cards are worth 6 points on their own. The Bach cards. In fact, they penalize you for getting the Maid Chief. So it's like, oh, okay, I'll go for these instead. So I dig the beer. The other extra things in the set, the events in the one building, the Beer Fest, not so thrilled with. I didn't like the events in the first set that much anyways. I think they're fine within the context of that set, but I've always liked expanding the house and Romantic Vacation more for the extra things they offer, like the Reminiscence cards. And it's the same thing here. The events are all centered around the beer cards and the beer deck, and one of them even explicitly is for taking out the Beer Fest card. There might be one of the buildings from the previous set that would be influenced by it, but that's really what it's for. And they're just, I don't know, no one wanted them in the couple of games that I played with this. No one did. Everyone was just like, why would I spend $5 for an event that might kind of sort of hurt you when I could get this awesome maid like Tony Darling that is great? Why wouldn't I not take that? Or why, if you have more than 5, you would never take it because you'd get either, depending on what's available in your game, the 6 or the 7 card, which is amazing. So it's even more so than the base set. I would not bother with the events. People want to say, oh, but Nick, they offer up a wide variety of strategic options. I would argue with you on that, but that's fine. They're still not fun to me to play. And it takes me a little bit too much out of the deterministic, not that it isn't, but just it doesn't feel like the Tanto Cuore that I enjoy to play much when you're doing too many of those events. Like, I tried to do it, I forced myself to take the cards, and I just wasn't having as much fun with them. And the Beer Fest card, well, if you don't like doing the events, then that's the whole purpose of it, because the Beer Fest card is only to protect one card, and it's only worth 1 victory point on its own. That is just kind of a waste. I mean, yes, again, if you want to protect like a Bach, which is worth 6 points, or if you want to protect a Pilsner. But then even then, someone can just say, oh, well, obviously that card that unless you're doing some sort of weird bluff, obviously that card that you're protecting is very, very valuable to you, so I'll just put a Heavy Storm on it, and there you go, it's taken care of. And then you'll just easily take care of that. So you see what I'm saying here? The events and the Beer Fest, I think, are just sort of wasted space for me in the set, which is a shame, because everything else in the set is really, really great. But that's the downside for me, and it's easily skippable. You don't have to play with them at all. And I guess I'd give people the option, but it's really not that necessary. I'd rather play with the events from the first set, to be honest. Now, everything else in the set, which would be the general maids, are great. There's a lot of really interesting ones here. The Tony Darling card, which I already mentioned, is pretty versatile. It's just a great card altogether for only 5. A draw, a love, and a serving. And you could potentially get an extra buy by discarding a card you don't really want anymore. That was very interesting to me. The ultimate card of the set, the 7 cost 2-point card, whose name is escaping me right now because all of their names are weird. And they're not weird names, but I can't remember all of them. They're actually proper names, which is harder to remember than the funky fantasy names on a lot of these games. But the card that lets you draw 3 cards, but then everyone potentially has to discard a card as well. You will for sure. The other players, maybe not so much. Or maybe you not necessarily for sure you will, but probably. So that's very interesting to me. It's very, very powerful. Maybe perhaps even too powerful, but it's fun to use, so who cares? There's other interesting ones too. The ones that actually let you get the beer cards can be fun because, for instance, there's the prevalence of the abilities that let you have an ability as soon as you buy the card off of the stack. I genuinely can't remember if those were in the previous sets. They may have been, but they felt more prevalent here, and I like it. Because now it sort of scoots you in the direction of taking a card you might not normally would have gotten. Like the Ute card is not that great, because the most it's ever going to be worth is 2 points if you chambermaid it. But you're like, okay, I have 3, I don't really have anything else to spend on, and I could draw an extra card at the end of my turn, which could be great, and it is worth points, points. Yeah, okay, I'll go ahead for it. And I like that. And choosing a card at the right time, like, oh, I need some extra servings, but he doesn't have a deck right now, so... or he's only got 1 card in his deck, I should say, and that actually happened in the first game with the set I played. So why would I take this card now? Oh wait, it's not going to be as worthwhile if I do this. I'll buy this card instead. So it opens up some more interesting options, and some of the other sort of standard cards are pretty interesting, like that are not beer related, like the one that lets you use all of you draw 2 cards, and then you can use any of your chambermaid chiefs as 1 love cards, which can be quite powerful if you were going for that strategy, or you didn't really weren't too concerned about chambermaiding your starting Matilde cards too early, or whatever chambermaid chiefs you're playing with. The beer card that lets you that's what I was about to say, actually. You purchase the card and then can immediately buy a beer for 2. Pretty cool. Her sister, the more advanced version of her, that lets you you have to spend a serving and just discard a 1 love card, or I think it might be any love card to get 1, is also more interesting, a little more versatile / restrictive. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the general maids in this set. I think they're all pretty interesting, and it's more variety to add into the mix if you're really a dedicated Tanto Cuore player with all of the other cards that you can already mix together. The pace of Tanto Cuore expansions has definitely not kept up with its forefather game, Dominion, so having more variety in this case is pretty good. And I like the beer cards too. I think of the optional variant things you can add in, it's almost to the point of Reminiscence and the buildings. Not quite as interesting, but still another arrow in the quiver. If you could play with all of them all together, which I haven't tried, that might be a little bit too much, but it might be interesting as well. I just don't like the events in the building. That's the only downside to this set. But still, if you're a Tanto Cuore fan, I think you should pick it up. I think it's worth it, even if it doesn't quite hold up to my favorite set at this point, which is Romantic Vacation. But again, this isn't going to change your mind about Tanto Cuore. If you didn't like the artwork, if you didn't like the theme, if you didn't like the Dominion-y aspects of it before, you won't like it now, but existing players will find a lot more stuff to enjoy with it. So that's Tanto Cuore Oktoberfest. I like it a lot. Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.